Hey everyone! Last time we went over creating a tileable texture and baking a 3D object's normals onto a plane, which will cut down on our Jingloid's poly count considerably. So now let's get to modeling. I'm just going to disable the visibility of my camera so that it doesn't get in the way. Let's start by hitting Shift A and adding a circle with 32 vertices. This time we're going to bake a high poly model's normals onto a low poly, so we can use a slightly higher vertex count for our initial geometry. 32 is plenty. Tab into edit mode and make sure it's all selected. As we've done with the other gyroids, start shaping your character. Extrude out edge loops with E and use all the basic transforms to get your object shaped. I have a couple reference images I'm looking at to get the rough shape. I'm going to switch over to Eevee. You generally don't model in rendered view anyways, but Eevee will be easier to look at if you do. Select all with A and shade smooth. Before we go too far on the character shape, we can lay out the UVs for the texture we made last time. If we do it now, it'll be easier to get the texture to tile correctly. Switch to Edge select this back edge, hit Ctrl E to bring up the Edge menu, and choose Mark Seam. Hit A again to select all, and head into the UV editor in the bottom area. Hit U over the 3D viewport, and choose Unwrap. Since this shape is a simple cylinder, the UVs are lined up nicely, and fit perfectly into the UV window, which is what we need to happen for our texture to look correct. In the UV editor, select all with A, and rotate by 90 degrees. The positioning doesn't matter at this point. Switch to the Material tab, and add the button material we made last time. If we look at the reference pic, these buttons are clearly too large, so in the UV editor, select all and try scaling by 2. This looks a little closer, but we've got about 8 buttons that we can see per row, and the reference pic has quite a few more. We'll come back to the UVs in a second, but the lighting in my scene is pretty bad currently, so let's add an HDRI in the World Properties tab. Click the yellow button here and choose Environment Texture. Then open an HDRI, which you can get for free from polyhaven.com. It's a great site. Now that we can see what's going on, let's scale the UV by 0.5 to get it to the original size. And try scaling it up by 3. This sizing looks pretty good to me. What we want to do now is select the upper edge loop and edge slide it by double tapping G. Try to line it up with a row of buttons. The reference picture has 5 rows of buttons, so let's alt select the bottom loop and slide it up to right below the 5th row. And always good to make sure your normals are facing the right way. So select all, hit Alt N, and choose Recalculate Outside. And this is when I noticed my normal map had deleted itself, so I unfortunately had to go rebake and save it. Always save your textures. So when I connect my normal map back up, it looks much better. This light is blindingly bright, so I'm going to drop its wattage a bit. Because of my rebaking fiasco, I'm in cycles again, so I gotta go back to Eevee. And we should switch the color management back to Filmic. I still had it set to standard from way back in part 1 when we made the tileable texture. And we can see the normal map is working pretty good. Select all and duplicate with Shift D to make the hat. And edge slide so we only have 3 loops of buttons. Hit Ctrl R and scroll the mouse wheel to add 2 edge loops in here. Switch to the UV editor and select everything. Click here to switch the active texture over to the coin color. As we move the UVs along the x-axis, you can see the texture tiles very nicely, so move it somewhere. If you want to, you can also adjust the UVs on the lower part. The buttons are lined up a little differently on the hat, so let's do that real quick. Select the middle row of faces, and in the UV editor, move them on the x-axis. That looks pretty good. And that's the 2 most involved texture sections laid out. If you aren't satisfied with having to tab out to look at the reference images, there's a couple of ways to get them into Blender. You can use a mod called Import Images as Planes, which comes with Blender, you just have to enable it, and then import the reference images and use those as guides. Or you can go into your camera settings and add background images, so that way the camera has a reference image built into it. Then just line up your camera. Hit numpad 5 to go into right view, and adjust the transforms of the camera to line it up somewhat like this. Then hit numpad 0 to enter camera view. and adjust the scale of our body pieces to more closely resemble the reference. Don't worry about getting it perfect, and try not to scale on any axis independently too much, otherwise the buttons will stretch. Scaling the top of the hat is going to be trickier, since we have some edge loops in the middle, but it's pretty easy. Turn on proportional editing, switch the fall off to linear, and adjust the fall off circle with your mouse wheel to encompass all the edge loops, then scale down. During this part I was having a little bit of a brain fart, but just hit S Shift Z to scale down on the X and Y axis, and it'll do what I wanted it to. For some reason I couldn't figure out why it wasn't doing what I wanted it to, so I dissolved the inner edge loops and scaled the top edge loop down, and then re-added edge loops and adjusted the UVs again. Don't do that, just do the first thing. Okay, relative success! Now we can build the rest of our character's shape with edge loops. As I go, I want to create and assign materials to each section. Switch to Face Select. Select these loops of faces and create a new blue material. Ideally, use a color similar to the blue from your button material. Do the same here. As always, adjust the positioning of stuff as you go. I'm going to select and bevel these edges with Ctrl B to make them more circular. Select the middle edges and turn on spherical proportional editing. Scroll the mouse wheel to adjust the fall off until it's very small, and make these areas a little more pronounced. Alt-select this edge loop, and while holding Shift, Alt-select this edge loop as well. Hit F3 to bring up the search menu, and find Bridge Edge Loops. Ctrl R to add edge loops, and shape the face area. Select all of these face loops, create a new lighter blue material, and assign it to these faces. Keep extruding loops to create the shape. To fill in the final opening, extrude a loop and scale by 0 to move them all to the center. Bevel any edges you want to. Shade everything smooth, and assign the lighter blue material to its tiny little top hat. And mark any edge loops as sharp when you want the shading to look sharp. Sharp edges don't do anything by themselves, so we need to add an edge split modifier, which we can do in the Modifier tab. Disable edge angles so it only applies sharp edges to the areas we choose to mark. Back to extruding and scaling and beveling stuff. Make adjustments as you go to fine-tune the shape. Assign the lighter blue color to its little tiny shoe area. If I switch my camera to perspective, I think the character is pretty close. It's not exact, but good enough. Here I'm changing my render settings back to default, which we changed originally in the first video for rendering textures. And I adjusted my camera settings to line up the reference slightly better. Since we plan on baking this model's normals to a low poly model, we can go a little overboard with the geometry. So let's add a subdivision modifier, which temporarily breaks the textures, but we can fix it by adding sharp edges between any material changes. Just keep adjusting your shapes until you're happy with them. That seems to have solved it. Thank you for watching. Next time we'll finish the High Poly model and create its face using Boolean modifiers. Please like and subscribe. Tell us what you'd like to see us make in the comments. Maybe share a video with a friend. We also have a Patreon. Thank you again. Stay safe. I love you. Goodbye.